All right, what is up, everyone? Jordan here, hanging out with some friends. I'm going to let them intro themselves in a second, but obviously, we're recording these videos, and the whole idea behind this is it's holiday season. We know that it's been a really difficult year in 2020, and we know that there's a lot of young people out there that are struggling. And so, we wanted to have some conversations with some people who are living in the mental health, life coaching space on what they're seeing and how some of the tools that they have may help us during the holiday season be more engaged with ourselves and then be more engaged with the people around us, particularly the young people around us. So, anyways, as we start this conversation, super excited today to introduce the Lambroses. Hey, so you guys take it away. Tell us who you are and what you do.
Ladies first.
Oh my. Yeah, so my name is Jessica Lambros. I'm a licensed professional counselor, and I own a private practice in Gilbert, where I supervise there's 5 of us there I focus mostly on trauma, anxiety, depression, different things like that. And so we range all the way from kiddos up to adults and couples and different things like that, just dealing with mental health issues. So.
Didn't you have like an 80-year-old at one point?
Yeah, I think my youngest has been 5, and then my oldest has been 84.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
Yes. Wide range of people who need support. So yeah, been doing that for about 5 years now in total. So.
I'm Ryan.
That's awesome.
I'm a professional life coach, and I host my own podcast called Redefine, just helping people redefine everything in life to help understand it better. Was a youth pastor for about 11 years, and yeah, my heart is just for people to find life and to be able to live life to the fullest. So, yeah.
That's dope. I'm super excited to have you guys on. Thank you for being willing to spend a little time with me and with the people that are going to be watching and listening to the content. And so let's dive in. First question for you guys. What are you seeing with depression, anxiety, and suicide with young people right now?
Yeah. I'm so glad you're doing this topic because it really is something that's so prevalent this year, especially with everything with the quarantine. So change is hard, I think, for anybody. But I see several different teenagers, like pre-teenage even, and this is really the first trauma, if you will, that a lot of them have been through in the sense of like nationally, you know what I mean? Like you think of 9/11 or you think of different things, and there's just been so much that has been going on lately on a bigger scale. Obviously, we each go through things individually, but a lot of them, like, they were really afraid. I've seen a ton of anxiety with just like not even realizing like the threats that are out there to all of us. There's like I see a lot of teens with a lot of anxiety, like socially or emotionally, identity development type stuff. But this was different. They're like, oh my gosh, like death could come, like those types of things have been really prevalent, or afraid of losing someone that they care about, or their way of life, like having to stay home.
Yeah.
So where I've seen a lot of it, at least just this past year, has mostly been in relationships and in attachment. The anxiety of being away from support, like with their friendships or their teachers or different things at school. And then anxiety with just what's going to happen, the unknown and all the change that's happening socially, culturally, politically, you name it. There's a lot of change that's happening there. Depression, I think a lot of loneliness. A lot of loneliness, a lot of disconnect. And so like suicide, as far as that goes, I was just talking to Ryan, I've had 3 teens over the last like couple weeks go inpatient for suicidal, thoughts, and a couple who actually even attempted, from other coworkers in my office. So it's really, really high, devastatingly so, to the point where like they don't have space in some of the behavioral health hospitals. Like I had to call 5 different places and somebody's like, yeah, there's a bed here, but you got to get here before somebody else does. And I was like, oh my gosh, like it's that bad right now. So yeah, the rates are pretty high, as far as like how all of this is impacting or weighing on all of the young people like right now. Are you seeing similar, like with the kiddos that you're engaging with?
Yeah, I think this time, I mean, I think as a leader and or a pastor or somebody who interacts with teenagers or young adults, it's always in the back of our mind of, I think teenagers struggle with depression or anxiety or have suicidal ideology, and or they're the few, and I think it's just 2020 has kind of woken everybody up to go, no, it's not a select few. It's actually a majority.
Yeah.
And almost making people face the fact and the realization of, no, I think actually living as a teenager in 2020, it's almost a given that they have struggle with anxiety, have a type of depression, or be depressed about something, might not necessarily be, diagnosed with depression, because
Yeah.
that's a different thing.
Yeah.
But with the publicity of social media and outlet for, I mean, everything is a Google search away. Suicidal ideology has now become extremely prevalent.
Yeah.
When a kid in Texas takes his life on, and films it live or something along those lines, everybody can see it, and those thoughts sit in people's minds. And so I think it's starting to wake people up to go, this is not an outlier. It is a reality for most teenagers.
Yeah, no, I heard on the news the other day there's an 8-year-old that died of suicide.
Wow.
8 years old. Yeah, it's really it's and I've even noticed, I had several students tell me over the last couple months they do like a lot of suicide awareness now in schools because of that reason. But even that can be super triggering, right? Because if students have had suicidal thoughts and maybe they're really afraid of those, or they're trying to move away from them, or they don't want anybody to know, it brings it up, So a lot of them I've had students have panic attacks just from watching that or knowing a friend. And then I have just as many students, if they themselves haven't had suicidal thoughts, they have a lot of trauma from a friend who had, because they get into caretaker roles, and these loyalty roles of like, I have to save my friend. They'll be up. I have several students who, when they come to see me, they're like, oh, I've been up every morning till 3 a.m. talking to my friend because I thought they were going to kill themselves. And I was like, oh my God. And then they feel very guilty asking for support from an adult, because then they get mad at each other because they're like, how could you tell someone? Like, there's just so much that comes with that, because it's a very vulnerable topic. It's not something that a lot of people are comfortable talking about. And I do appreciate the fact that social media or the access to information has brought a lot of awareness and brought a lot of comfortability. But it's also a lot of misinformation sometimes, right? Like so much information. This generation has more input than any other generation. And so there's a lot of room for, I had a student the other day tell me, well, I watched this TikTok video and I have depression and that's just the way my brain's wired and that's how I'll always be. And I was like, oh no, like that's not true. Like, and even understanding that, like Ryan mentioned, not everything is clinical. Like you can go through grief and sadness, and that doesn't mean you're clinically depressed. You can go through nervousness or fear, and that doesn't mean you have anxiety, and so a lot of misinformation out there that it makes me sad, because then sometimes the support isn't sought because, oh, I'll just look that up. Parents like, oh, I'll just buy you a book on tools to work through your depression. And it's like, they need more. There's relationship that's needed in that. So that's kind of what at least I'm noticing on my end.
That's good. So for us, lay people, should I say it that way, us normal peeps, even though I'm in school studying, professionals, help us. So you mentioned attachment, and I know that's a theory, right? And it's a theory that kind of anchors and finds itself in a lot of other theories that have developed, like in the future of psychology. But if you were gonna explain what attachment is, like super simply to somebody, so they could kind of get an idea of what you mean, like what would you say that is?
So I would say attachment, like relationally, it's how we relate to one another or find safety within. And I like reference attachment in 3 different ways. So there's like up attachment, in attachment, and out. And so we need to be attached with higher sense of self, higher power, whatever that is, like something outside of yourself, excuse me, and outside of what is here, like a bigger sense of purpose, a higher power, if you're, you know what I mean, if you're spiritual, that level of attachment, which just means an attunement or a connection of finding a reflection in myself, to connect with that. And then same thing in here. I need to attach to myself. Am I being honest with myself? And do I know who I am? And can I connect to that and honor the space within myself, that kind of attachment. And then attachment with others, right? And so That's one of the things I've noticed, particularly with young people, that is missing right now. A lot of them feel connected all the time, right? They're constantly on their social media or connected, but that's not full attachment. And a lot of them don't know how to be without that either. I have teens who their anxiety is literally because they have panic attacks if they can't have their phone and someone's not talking to them. They didn't get enough likes or they didn't get enough interaction with someone else, because they don't know how to be with themselves, right? They don't know how to be alone and stay attached within themselves. And if they're not reflected in someone else, it's all over, right? And so I think the authenticity of attachment isn't just oh hey, there you are. It's being attuned to, right? It's you really seeing me and attuning. And that's what's so important. Like when I talk about parent-child relationships, so important, right? Like we really truly only need three things to be resilient to trauma. And trauma can be anything. That's not just like the big T traumas of, the very overt traumas, but like anything, like being bullied, failing a test, like all of
moving
these.
houses.
Moving houses, yeah, like a dog passing away, you name it. Like the things that when people hear trauma, they think, oh no, it's just these big, and it's like, no, we go through every single day waking up in your current circumstances can be traumatic. And so we need three things to heal from that, really truly, to make it through that, to survive. We need someone to attach and attune to us, right? To really see us. And that's why you see like a lot of movies made where that coach, is the one who got them through, because they attune to them. I see you, I'm with you, I'm watching you, and I can really sense into you. We need somebody to hold space for our emotions, right? To validate them. Like, yeah, I can see you're angry. That's okay that you're angry, or you're sad. I get that. Like, that's okay, and kind of attach to that and attune. And then to re-narrate our story in that moment, right? And so a lot of times kids or teens will start to pick up narratives about themselves or about the world that until their brain is fully formulated, they really don't have enough resources, excuse me, to pull from and really use. And so they start to build narratives that just aren't really based in truth. So 5-year-old spills a cup of milk and they get yelled at, and they leave that situation feeling like, I'm a bad kid, I'm a bad, right? And it's like all of us are like, no, that was an accident, like even the parent who got upset and yelled might have thought, well, we know it's an accident, but that child may have interpreted it as, I'm bad, I got yelled at and I'm bad, and they leave that experience starting to deepen the root of that belief structure. And so we really need somebody to come alongside of us when something happens that's overwhelming. They have to attune to us, hold space for our emotions, and then tell us truth in that moment in case we've picked up any negative narrative in that, And so a lot of us aren't getting that right now, especially our young kids, right? Like, because that age range kind of isolates anyway. So they're not being attuned to. And if they are being attuned to, it might not be from caring, supportive adults, right? And that might not even be the adult's fault. It might be the child thinks they don't need it. And so I think that, speaks to, just what we need within attachment, in other words, right? Like just being seen and attuned to. Do you have anything to add to that? I know you're studying attachment.
No, I mean, I think that helping teenagers distinguish the difference between being connected and being attached. I think there's crossover. It's like a Venn circle crossover, but it's not, full connection isn't full attachment. So that, I think that's huge, because I think what kids are feeling now in quarantine, in isolation, staying at home during school, not hanging out in social groups is, I don't think they feel a loss of connection, although they verbally communicate that because that's the only verbiage they have. But their connection has not changed because they're on social media, they're digitally connected, they even can call each other. What's happening is they're detaching. And it's not their fault most times, it's the circumstances, it's quarantine, it's COVID. It has detached them from whatever relationships it is, or it's made them face the detachment of themselves. They are now able to look at themselves for the first time. And it's like, ooh, I don't like that. And so they detach from themselves. It's made them question their higher power, the divine God. Where is God in this? So they detach from that. And then, within a church setting, within even athletics being canceled, their coach connection. I don't have my teacher. I don't have my coach. I don't have my leader. And now, so all three of those things have been detached. And they can feel connected, but then they go, why do I feel so horrible? Why am I so anxious?
Well,
not attached.
that's important too. I think this actually kind of ties in with all of the questions you mentioned, Jordan, because I think it's really important to recognize. So like neuroscience like talks about like neuroception is this idea of finding like, how do I know I'm safe in attachment with someone? So my five sense perception, who I am, senses my surroundings, and I am either safe or unsafe based on that, which kind of speaks to the anxiety, right? And so if I look at you and you're making eye contact, you have a warm smile, you're nodding and agreeing with me, right? Like I start to sense into that and I calm down. Something inside of me settles and says like, Jordan's hearing me, we're resonating with each other, we're connecting and attaching, like we're on the same page, this feels safe. If you all of a sudden get like this when I'm talking, I'm going to see that and I'm going to pick up on that and say, what did I do? I might start getting anxious. I might start looking around like what's happening, right? And so we read one another's body language and nonverbal cues. Over 90% of communication between people is nonverbal, right? There's so much happening that we don't realize. And so the hard part about COVID with distancing, even with masks, if you're missing a lot of the neuroception that is needed to feel attuned to, right? Like if you can't see my facial expressions, you don't know if I'm smiling, if I'm scared, if I'm, and so I've noticed a lot of my clients will even tell me, especially my trauma ones with sensitive nervous systems, going shopping at the grocery store, they leave like so tense and they're like, I don't know what it is. They can't read people. We can't read one another. I can't see you. And it's almost like this dissociative, I'm floating as I'm going through, and these aren't people, they're just walking things, you know? And so we miss one another. And it's that same feeling. I think it's interesting. The masks, I think, have done for us kind of recognizing what, and I know we harp on teens for social media, but adults too. Like there's this false sense of connection. When I am watching someone on social media, and I will tell myself like, oh yeah, I know that person. No, you don't. Like I haven't seen them and interacted with them, but there's this false sense of like, I know them, they know me. But it doesn't meet some kind of internal need of attachment or connection. We have to be attuned. It's not just, hey, how are you? It's hey, how are you, right? It's different. There's two totally different types of attachment there. And that's really important when we talk about mental health, because that's a really important piece. That's why therapy is helpful, because someone sits and attunes to you, right? But you can have that in lots of other relationships.
Yeah. I mean, one of the most used phrases that describes Jesus's interaction with people is he sees them. Yeah. I don't think necessarily the ancient writers of these gospel narratives knew the psychological neuroceptive power of that.
Sure.
But in order for Jesus to attach to people, to create full loving attachment, he had to see them, and they had to be seen by him. Right. So that's a huge thing. And when you go into a constant, long period state of detachment or non-attachment, you immediately go inward to shame, fear, intimidation, and anxiety is fearing or projecting that shame into the future. And what does that look like? And depressive thoughts, depression is projecting or remembering or allowing the past to impact that shame, or living in that past to impact that shame. Correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, there's the aspects of it. She's a professional. But like that heightens when we go long periods of time without detaching or without attaching to somebody going, no, hey, like I see you, like you're okay, I love you. What happened does not, you're not a bad person because that happened. Or hey, why are you worrying so much about what's happening in the future? Like, you're okay right now. I love you. Let's talk. I think that's what's contributing.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So let me ask another question. I think I'm going to roll this question into one. So what signs should adults be paying attention to during the holidays in terms of mental health for young people in their lives? And then also, where does that cross over to emergency or professional help being needed? Because I think sometimes, people, like you said earlier, just give them a book. Just, hey, just sit with them for a day or, whatever. Yeah. have their uncle come over who is a professional, right? You know what I mean? And so what should we be looking out for? And also, when does that cross over? Like, hey, if you're seeing these things, you need to do something and do
Yeah,
it
this is
quick.
great. Yeah, and I think that kind of was prepped with the answer we just gave. The hard part is I get so many parents who are like fix them, and I'm like, oh, this is so late. Like, you know what I mean? This is like too little too late type of a thing where
Mm,
you should be doing this stuff ahead of time. Don't wait until your kid is so desperate that they are reaching to suicidal thoughts or to, you know what I mean? Like the attachment and the attunement is needed now. If you're like, hey, my kid's fine, everything's good, I think they're coping great with everything that's going on right now. Awesome. How attuned are you to them? Have you checked in with them? Are you connecting with them? Are you like ask those questions? And I feel like a lot of parents like just check the box of like, hey, you're fine, everything's fine, we've all got a lot going on, and they'll refocus somewhere else. And we need that for preventative, right? Not just
hmm
for, okay, fine, I'll spend more time with you. Fine, I'll pay more attention. Fine, I'll listen to you. You've been asking for help. Okay, fine. Right? It's kind of too late at that point because now you're doing, I'm just digging you out of the hole, but something's got to keep you floating. So I would say sign wise, that's really hard to tell.
mm,
I would say the number one thing you can do is you need to attach to your kid, like, because it's not always the same signs, right? Like not every kid is the same. And so you need to know your kid and you need to know when something's off. You can kind of tell when a parent is attuned when they come in and they are like, yeah, there's just these little things. I've noticed there's a little different here. She's kind of, not, and I'm like, oh, you notice, you're picking up on that. Not kind of like a parent who comes in and they'll tell me like, I don't know, they seemed fine yesterday and now they're just like suicidal. And I'm like, nah, that was building. Nobody just wakes up one day and all of a sudden goes from 0 to 60, right? And so just a level of attunement, I would say. And so signs would be like major shift in things that they enjoy. So anxiety is really, clinically we look for things like, I am so sorry. We look for things like racing heart, um, like hyperventilation, racing thoughts, avoidance of going places, or doing things like that, a lack of focus, jitteriness, just a lot of like tension. We're looking for that for anxiety. For depression, I'm looking for lack of motivation, which that's hard in the teen years, like, the lack of motivation, no interest in things that they used to enjoy, like not wanting to sleep all the time, reduced appetite, you know what I mean? Lots of sadness or guilt, lots of shaming, just unable to kind of, we talk about window of tolerance, like down here
hmm
is kind of the depressive shutdown, up here is the anxiety. And so I would say look for signs that are outside the normal range of your child, right? If your kid's normally kind of happy-go-lucky and they're kind of super closed off now, they're not really sharing much, might be a sign to check in with them, right? That doesn't always mean something's wrong. It might just be something happened and they need help walking through something. But changes in their pattern of personality or normalcy within range, because high school or junior high, like that's prime time for identity, shifts. But I would say signs, if it's just so hard. That's really, really hard to ask. You know what I mean? Suicidally, so I have a lot of teens, for example, where they'll always be wearing long sleeves. If they're cutters, for example, like if they're always wearing long sleeves and it's like 1,000,000 degrees out, I'll have parents say that like, she's kind of weird. She's always wearing sweaters and it's like 110. Have you asked her about that? You know what I mean? Like, it's usually
hmm
like there's a sense of hiding. And so I would look for any signs of like self-harm, obviously. I would look for signs of shifting in personality. But again, attunement, eating habits, sleeping habits, right? Just different, even like the way that they shift in dress, for example, like can be indicators, but can also not, right? Like that's super hard. So I would say the level of attunement, I can tell, but I read people for a living. But when you meet with somebody, you can tell this, like when you've met with a student before and you can just see it on them, like they're heavy or they're nervous or they're tense, right? You can see it. And so I think like the most important thing that you can do as far as signs go is attune to your kid, know what's their normal range, and see, kind of what helps or makes it worse, you know what I mean, kind of a thing. So, but
That's good.
suicidal thoughts is definitely a big one. They never want to go out anymore, social patterns, different things like that.
I'd say presence is powerful. there's hundreds of different signs. And like she said, it's hard. But I wrote this down, like, for parents specifically, don't beat yourself up so much on trying to find the signs. Like, don't know the signs, know your kid.
Right. Yeah.
Like, we know this within marriage. Jess knows if something's off with me, even if because I'm really good at faking it, everything's fine. And it's, but she can, to the point, know the energy is off.
Right.
I can just walk into your office, Ryan, and I know something's up. And then so hey, what's up? Something's off. And there was no behavior. I mean, there's no signs, but because she is so attuned to, she's present, relationship, like, she will be able to sense that. And I think parents, we lose that with our kids because of the busyness, because of whatever. So, like, especially during the holiday season, that we get so busy,
distracted. Yeah.
The presents, not gifts, but presents go away. And so don't know the signs, know your kid.
Right.
And then I would say something that can help draw the signs out is lead with vulnerability.
Yeah.
As a parent, are you being real during this holiday time? Parents, adults, leaders, we have our trauma that comes up during holiday season because we're expected, the reason for this season is everything's great. This is amazing. And it's fun and it's family, and the trauma comes up for us. So are we sharing that with our kids, especially with teenagers? You create the environment for them to attach, to go, I'm not feeling okay. The greatest thing a parent can do is sit down and go, hey, I just want to share this with you. I'm really struggling with this holiday season. It reminds me of my mom and my relationship with her, or whatever it might be. COVID, Christmas during COVID, I'm freaking out about it. I hate this. I don't know. Our holiday traditions are blowing out the window. Like, this sucks. I hate this. And I'm kind of depressed about it. And I really don't like that. And as soon as a kid sees that their parent struggles with that, now the kid goes,
freedom to speak.
Can I share something? Like, and it might not even have anything to do with the holidays. It might just be,
So, and I think another sign could be watching for narrative, watching for how they talk about themselves, how they talk about others, you know what I mean, type of a thing. If you hear your kid being like, well, nobody, why are you going to go to that thing? No, I never get invited anywhere. Some parents are like, oh, okay. I'm like, about attention to any shaming narratives, anything that they're, you know what I mean? Like anything that you can see where their speech has changed as far as how they're viewing themselves or how they're viewing others. And then I would say, as far as connecting with them, that's really important, because they talk about, like, with teenagers side by side, right? So, like, in the car, not directly like sit down at the dinner table, mom and dad, look at me in the eyes, how are you, and your
light comes on.
It can feel like an interrogation. So you're gonna have to be sly about how you connect with your teenager, because they don't like as much of that direct, because there's a lot of, like, fear of, like, am I in trouble? What did I do? Are you gonna be mad? Is this feeling gonna be acceptable? So vulnerability invites in a lot of safety, but also doing it in a non-overwhelming way, right? Like, just constant check-ins, because they can tell when. I have a lot of teens who tell me they get almost bitter that mom and dad didn't care for X amount of, this amount of time, but now all of a sudden my behaviors changed or my attitudes changed, and now they want to know everything. And it's almost like a bitterness and a closed offness. And so if you're doing that consistently, it's not manipulative in that way, or your kids don't feel that, because they're quite intelligent that way.
Openness in order to get something or get a response is not vulnerability, it's manipulation. So, like, be vulnerable to be vulnerable. If your kid goes, yeah, dad, I'm really sorry that you're going through that, or even doesn't respond, you're not sharing to get a response, you're sharing to be real.
You're modeling good behavior. And then as far as, like, the emergency signs, like you said, so I would say, if your kid at any point in time has ever asked you to get them help in any way. I have a lot of parents who are like, oh yeah, they asked for counseling forever ago, but it's just like, it's expensive, or I don't want to go. And I'm like, like, if your kid comes to you and talks to you about cutting, if your kid comes to you, I was like, you don't understand how rare that is. So I have a lot of parents who are like, oh my gosh, they came to me and told me. And I was like, you need to pause and thank yourself for that gift, that your child feels safe enough to come to you and be honest.
Wow.
So I would say self-harm behaviors, and that can be anything from cutting, burning, to even like just being risky or impulsive. Like, they're just reckless, or they don't care for themselves that way. I would look for signs of like, hey, you're not showering, you're not eating, you're not sleeping, you don't seem to ever hang out with friends, you have a hard time even connecting with people in person. I have a lot of parents who are like, they just seem like a zombie, they don't connect with anybody, like, so those types of things. But I would say emergency help is saved for the moments if your child even jokes passive aggressively about like dying. I've had a bunch of parents be like, I thought they were kidding. They'd be like, oh, I'm just going to kill myself right now. Or they'll say it when they're in a fight. Like I have a lot of parents who will tell me that their kids are like, oh, you just want me to die, don't you? And they never thought anything of it. But really, that's really something that child or teenager is probably considering at that moment. And it's almost
Mm.
like a test or a check-in. So if your child has mentioned anything about harming themselves, not wanting to be here, wishing life would stop, anything like that, you need to call. And that doesn't always mean, like I tell parents, just because like someone's cutting, for example, like a teen is cutting, that doesn't necessarily mean that they want to die. It could be a way of relieving pain, or waking themselves up to feel something. And so that doesn't always mean like rush into the ER. It just depends on the severity level, but it does mean call a professional like now. You know what I mean? And get
Mm.
that input. And that's why we do those assessments, to see how serious is this. So I would say emergency signs look like anything like that. If you have access to the social media, look at it. They will post. I have a lot of them. I think the 3 or 4 that I have heard of recently, and I actually have a family who their son did film it and committed suicide. You know what I mean? So it is,
Wow.
social media is a good indicator. Know your kids' friends. Welcome them in, you know what I mean? Have a
Mm.
relationship with them to the point where they feel safe and comfortable, if they know their friend's struggling, that they can come to you too. You know what I mean? So that's
That's
always,
good.
good too.
I'd say too, I mean, so I think the generation before me, so my parents, it was any type of that behavior, it was immediately deemed they're just trying to get attention.
Hmm.
And I still hear it with parents. They're doing this and it's attention seeking behavior. Um, and it's like, if I can encourage parents and leaders, yes, it is attention seeking behavior. And there's a reason why they're trying to get attention. And it might not be as drastic as they want to take their life.
Right.
But it's serious enough that they are doing something disruptive to get attention. That means they don't know, it's not safe to just straight up say what they want.
Right.
Or they don't,
Yeah.
there's lots of stuff. And
Attention seeking behavior it's how we go about it that can be unhealthy, not the fact that we want attention or
right,
care, right?
right.
There's nothing wrong with that. But if you have a child or a teen with a lot of attention seeking behavior, you best pay attention.
Yeah,
Right? How
yeah.
we reinforce that, or how we go about feeding into that, is really important.
Mm.
But the fact that they're reaching like that, that tells you they had to go to that level of desperation. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
To
If a kid
get it.
consistently cries wolf, he's not just he or she's not just a liar. He or she's not just he's they're consistently crying wolf for a reason.
There's something
There's
going on
something
there.
else
Yeah.
going on there. And so and it's parents, we won't be able to figure that out on our own, just out of our own logic and reasoning. Find a counseling practice or a counselor and call them. They'll give you a consultation.
Yeah.
Say, this is just what's gone on. What do you think?
Yeah.
And a good counselor is not going to manipulate you. Well, why don't we do 4 sessions to just, like they're going to help you and go, it could be this, it could be this. Maybe come in for one free consultation or one thing and just let's talk with them, or that they're willing to work with you. But so often parents are, it's attention seeking behavior and I'll figure it out. And they leave it at that. And then it's too late. Then they are finally calling the counselor after the fact, and it's
Right.
and now there's a bitterness. And now there's teenagers, it's more of like, now my parents are in a sense tattling on me. Now they're not helping me. They're just trying to fix me. And you've lost some relational attachment
Right.
with your kid.
Yeah, I think it's really just important to watch those signs of when they're reaching, right? When they're trying, even if it's like with friends, like if you have I have a lot of teen girls with a lot of insecurities. And so attention seeking behaviors with the way they dress or the people that they want to spend time with, or, different things like that. Like, keep an eye on that. That's not like, oh no, they're bad and I need to fix that. What's behind that? Like, there's always something underneath, like what's motivating that, what's going on inside, you know what I mean? And so connecting with, so I would say the emergency stuff is more so, I have another one who distressing images. Her mom found, like, she's an artist and she found really dark images that she was drawing. And that's how she kind of discovered, like, hey, are those images in your mind? And she's like, yeah, I've had thoughts of doing that myself. Right. And so there's
Wow.
lots of different ways. But if you're not attuning to your kid, it's not even fair game because you won't even know what to look for.
Mm.
Yeah. Attention seeking behavior, these signs all, correct me if I'm wrong, mostly or all come out of they don't feel safe in some capacity.
That could be part of it.
Like it's that it's some lack of attachment. And so when they are trying to get the attention, it's a bid for an attachment. They might not see it that way,
Yeah.
but that's our body, it's our mind naturally saying, like,
we're not knowing how to get their needs met,
Yeah.
right? Like, I don't know how to ask for help. And so I'm just going to be really loud. You know what I mean? Like, loud being, I'm going to try and create some kind of like bang, 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 look over here kind of a thing. Instead of just calmly coming and saying, I need help right now. I'm struggling,
like
right?
a 2-year-old who's hungry, you can't communicate that they're
Yeah,
hungry,
they haven't.
just starts crying or gets fussy. Well,
Yeah.
they're not being a bad kid.
No.
They're saying, I have a need and I don't know how to communicate it.
They
A
don't know how to process an
14-year-old
emotion.
is doing the same. They're not gonna, I mean, I don't think they will, but maybe they will. But they don't just sit screaming and crying and, pounding at the whatever. Some of them, but their way of doing that is,
Yeah, there's lots of different ways. Some of us
attention.
seek attention through achievement. Some of us seek attention through, everybody picks a thing. And I feel like that, I'm the smart kid. I'm the pretty one. I'm the, jock. I'm the whatever. Everybody's looking for that. And sometimes when those things get taken away, that's another thing I would look for. Watch for trauma. If your child had a very serious, deep relationship with someone and they broke up, keep an eye on that, right? Like watching for things that are disruptions. If your child, like, they live and breathe high school sports and that's everything to them and they aren't getting to go, are you checking in with them about that? What are you noticing? Because that's a huge part of who they are or what they believe they find themselves in. And so you got to ask those questions or kind of be aware of, like, anticipate some of those things and how they're going to impact your kids. So
That's really good. So last question for you guys. And you've kind of mentioned this, but I just want to leave at the end with a little bit of clarity on this. What questions should people be asking their teenagers throughout the holidays? Like, good, engaging questions they can ask to kind of maybe get at some of this stuff.
Sure.
And are there any tools or skills? I know you've mentioned a ton, but
Yeah. I mean, the questions are going to be hard, coming at them head on. Like, so have you ever been suicidal?
yeah.
You're probably not going to get, oh, yes, I have. And I am right now. You're going to need to notice signs. So I would say bringing observations and being curious, right? Curiosity is the most non-threatening thing. Not, hey, I've noticed that you're doing this and I think it's because you're this, right? Like, no, that's assumptions. That's, judgment on. Ask a question that's curious. Like, I'm just curious. I've noticed, like, you kind of have been spending a lot of time in your room. Like, tell me about that. Don't assume it's bad. Don't assume they're up to something. Ask a curious question, right? Like, that type of curiosity is non-threatening and invites in, some more safety in that conversation. So I would just be curious about whatever it is that you're noticing. Like, I've noticed you haven't been hanging out as much with your friends. Like, is everything going well there? Or, and they may give you it's fine. If you have a teen who, I have several of these parents are like, well, they just say everything's fine. And I'm like, again, too little, too late. That tells me they've disconnected so long ago that you're not going to have to do a ton of work to become safe and trustworthy again for that child to open up to you, right? Like, and so if you haven't reached that point and your child does talk to you, kind of gentle, just checking in and noticing and kind of just asking, like, rabbit trail questions into a deeper sense of, like, oh, so you haven't been hanging out with your friends. Oh, you guys got in a fight. Oh, that must have been really hard. Are you feeling lonely? Like, are you struggling with that? Like, kind of just deepening it. And if you start to hear things like, yeah, it's the worst. I don't even want to be friends with anyone anymore. Like, okay, like, asking, do you want me to get you some support for that? Is there anything I can do to help with that? Right? Like, sometimes all of us just need somebody to hold us or give us a hug or hear us out. Like, you know what I mean? Just somebody to connect to. Others of us, that'll open up Pandora's box. There will be tears, there will be anger, there will be all kinds of like, yeah, I'm not okay. And so I, even again, like vulnerability, or sometimes parents will bring it up like, hey, I saw on the news, a lot of teenagers have had suicidal thoughts, like, and that just broke my heart, and I care so much for you, and I just want you to know if you were ever struggling with that, you could let me know, something like that, where it's almost like you don't even have to ask the question, but more so just let the child know that you're there, that you can be, a safe place for them to share with. So that's part of it. I would say tools wise, again, that's super specific. There's tons of information out there, for like grounding. If your child has anxiety, they need to ground. They need to come down in that window of tolerance. And so that could be everything from breathing techniques to practicing calming body down. There's lots of supplements, or like even just different like natural ways of helping like resource anxiety. It can also be, something that they just need help with or fix, right? And so like that's lots of tools with connecting with like anxiety comes down. So you can look up grounding tools, there's a million, or mindfulness tools around like anxiety. Depression.
Look on TikTok with your kid. Literally, there's like mindfulness TikTok accounts that will walk you through breathing exercises, so that you're connecting at your kid level in something that in an arena that they love, and you're doing it with them. So
sure, I mean, there's a million different things you can do for anxiety, right? Like there's so many tools, and that's again, I love that there's so much information out there. So if it's minor, if it's like, hey, my kids, got some anxiety, but they don't necessarily need to see somebody. Oh Lord, there's so much information. I mean, there are so many books out there. There's so many podcasts. There's so many YouTube video, like, you know what I mean? So again, I would just make sure it's, if you have the option to pick a professional, right? Like, so like a lot of the TikTok videos, they're great, but they're just people who are like, hey, this has worked for me. And that's awesome. But again, I don't want misinformation, because I've seen some stuff go bad. So somebody who's been trained in that, who wrote a book about it, or who wrote a blog or a podcast, might be a little more in line with that. And then depression usually is more so coming awake, but I have noticed, and this is just like, especially with trauma, if I have a client who is shut down or depressive or really low, I know that 99% of the time, if I get them up in that window of tolerance, let's say I kind of wake them up, take off the covers, like, come on, we got to get back up here. They're going to have some level of anxiety, irritability, something that was going on that was so overwhelming that they had to shut down, and they felt so hopeless to overcome. Right. And so if it's grief, for example, let's say I'm super now depressed that, somebody's gone, and I'm just numb. I don't want to feel anything anymore. If somebody works to get me out of that depression, now maybe I'm going to deal with the anxiety of them not being here, the anger. So it's kind of almost like, I'd rather catch somebody on the uppers. I'd rather catch an anxious, irritable, overwhelmed client before I'd rather catch a depressive. Because if there's depression, oftentimes something else was going on that led to that kind of collapse, at least with trauma patterning for sure. And so it's almost like I know I've got double the work to do, because every single time it's like, oh, I'm awake, I feel things. Now it's overwhelming and I want to go back down again, And so I would say, like things for depression that help with that is, again, engagement, right? Attachment, attunement, change of scenery, right? If you're in bed all the time and you never get up, go outside, right? Like try and do something that you enjoy, spend time with someone that you care about, kind of bring yourself awake a little bit. So we want to like activate you with depression, and we want to calm you with anxiety. So it's like both are ending kind of in this middle, kind of calmer, grounded place, if you will.
I would say for parents, it's never the wrong time to be present.
Yeah.
So if it is too late, you haven't been present with your kid, sitting them down and being like, do you have suicidal thoughts? Or like you said, like, and they're like, no, it's fine. I'm fine. It's too late. Well, that doesn't mean it's not too late for you to be present, but it means presence is going to have to start with square one.
Right.
So maybe it's you sacrifice a day and you go and you pull your kid out of school and you just go have some fun. And you're not having really intense conversation about how are you doing and what's going on, but you're taking the step to go, I need to be present with my kid. And maybe it's, we haven't had dinner as a family in a long time. So tonight we're just gonna have dinner, and there's no agenda, there's no serious talk. We're gonna have dinner together. You know, it's never the wrong time to be present, to start being present with your kid. Because I think parents might hear this and go, oh my gosh, now I had to have these conversations, like, how are you? I saw in the, you know, if you have that relationship with your kid, if you've been present, you can have those. Sadly, I think a majority of familial,
Just a handful. Yeah.
I mean, if 50% of families are in a split home because of divorce, like that, it's hard to be present with your kid. And so it's never the wrong time to just start.
It doesn't have to be patient though, with understanding that that might take time to build the trust where that child can be vulnerable or safe enough to share things with you. And some parents get mad at that, like, tell me now. And they're like, no.
We spent an hour at the coffee shop and they didn't say anything. Well, was that the first time? Was that the first time that you hung out with your kid for an hour, like uninterrupted? That's probably why. And it's not shaming to you. It's baby steps. It's, you build on that. Hey, this time they didn't share anything. Okay, maybe do that consistently. Maybe on the fourth time they might drop something.
Right.
And you're aware of that, and you're, you know, so.
Yeah, because I think it is. And a lot of parents get frustrated because I'll tell their child the exact same thing they've been telling them. And they're just like, oh, but magically you say it. And I'm like, it's a different relationship. There's a lot that comes with it, you know what I mean? Like different relationships and authority with, you know what I mean? Authority with teachers or pastors or, you know, parents versus like a more different kind of relationship in therapy. So it's just different. But I would say very much so tools. It could be like truly just listening to your kid, let them express themselves, let them be, because a lot of them feel they're unacceptable. And I think that's where a lot of mental health comes from, is they feel like they're not approved of or they're not acceptable to their parents or to their teachers or to their, you know, friends. And so hear them out, ask them to explain who they are and be open-minded to that, right? Like I have a parenting coach in our office, that's her specialty. And she said something today or the other day that I was very shocked by, but she said, by the time your child is a teenager, you're done parenting. And I was like what? And she was like, you're done. Like your child, that upper part of their brain is already starting to form. You have laid foundation, but they're in there now. Like this is their game. They're going to play. They will follow the rules. You need to create boundaries, but you are not laying that foundation anymore. At this point, when you have a teenager, you're only it's connection. You're going to have to attach. They're going to have to trust you. And that's the only way you're going to impact change outside of the things you can enforce, which a lot of parents do. Right. And so we talk a lot about with discipline, for example, connection versus correction. You want to connect with your kid, not correct them. Right. Like, and so I think the power posturing that happens like in those relationships can make it worse. And so hear your kid on their level. Like, you tell me about you. I'm not the expert on you. You're the expert on you. You know what's going on inside your head more than I do. And a lot of parents are like, I know my child. I know they're not this, they are that. And I'm like, they're a teenager now. They got that part of their brain online and they're going to start developing who they are. And so again, like being open to getting to know them in a different way because they're starting to form into someone else.
And pay attention to your reaction. So not in a morbid way, but think to yourself, if your kid came to you and said, I have suicidal thoughts.
How are you gonna
and if your first impulse is, what's it like that, if your first reaction isn't like, anger. Oh my gosh, I'm so, I hurt for you in this, let's sit with this. Like, that means you need to do your own work as a leader, as a parent, to go, what just triggered in my mind when my kid comes to me and goes, I'm anxious or I'm depressed. And I immediately go, what? Why? Yeah. Why would you think that? You have a great life, whatever, instead of, oh my heart breaks. Let me sit with you in this. Right. Because a parental reaction
is huge. Yeah.
Is in that moment, your kid will go, you're safe or you're not safe.
And that's what a lot of my teens tell me, like with their suicidal thoughts or their self-harm, they're like, well, I didn't tell anyone because I thought they'd be mad at me. Or I thought I'd be a burden. My mom can't handle it. Like she panics every time I skin my knee. So if I told her I was having suicidal thoughts, she would she'd just lose it. And like, you have to watch yourself. You can't overreact when a child comes to you and shares something. They need you to hold space for that, because it was already scary enough to get to you with that feeling, right? And so hold it down to say, thank you for sharing that with me. We're going to figure that out together. I want to help you. I want to be here for you. And so that's a big one, because parents are so caught off guard with it. And yeah, it can be a lot. So
thank you guys so much. So much information that's helpful for everybody. I feel like I just learned a ton myself. I'm just like, wheels are turning. So yeah, thank you for taking the time to do this. For everybody that's listened, we hope that you found this conversation that we just had helpful, and I would encourage you to probably listen to this again more than once. Yeah.
How's you, Jordan?
And so, yeah, I'm hopeful that during this holiday season, Thanksgiving leading into Christmas, we can start to have those conversations, start to begin forming those attachments and connections if we haven't already, and go on from there to find some health in ourselves and health in our family. So thank you guys for listening. Thank you guys for being a part. We'll talk to everybody that is listening soon. Peace out.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jordan. Bye.